The boutique door opened with a soft chime, and Ava stepped inside, drawing glances from every corner of the polished showroom. Her coat was heavy, worn at the sleeves, and her shoes had lost their shine. But her presence, even in silence, shifted the room. The women gathered around champagne trays and silk-draped mannequins paused their conversations. Some lowered their glasses, others whispered behind thin smiles. At the far end of the room, beneath a golden chandelier, Sierra noticed her first. She didn't hide her smirk. "Well, look who decided to show up." Sierra's voice rang out, like a slap across glass. Ava's hand tightened around the strap of her purse. Her other hand instinctively rested on her stomach. The bump was undeniable now, a quiet, living truth beneath her layers. "I'm here to speak with Liam," she said, her voice low but composed. Sierra's heels clicked as she walked forward. Slow and theatrical, eyes never leaving Ava's face. Her red dress hugged her frame like it had been stitched on, her makeup untouched, her confidence cold and deliberate. "He's not interested in drama tonight," Sierra said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Especially not from someone he had to send away." Ava didn't blink. "He told me he'd be here." Sierra tilted her head, fake sympathy dripping from her tone. "Sweetheart, he's been here the whole time. You just haven't mattered enough to see it." Behind them, someone stifled a laugh. A woman near the champagne tray lifted her phone, pretending to scroll, but the camera lens was clearly aimed at Ava. "I'm not here to argue," Ava said, inching forward. "I just want to talk." "Oh, you want to talk?" Sierra stepped in closer, lowering her voice to a whisper Ava could still hear. "Then listen carefully. You're not his wife anymore. You're a walking stain. And that thing growing inside? You? Nothing more than a mistake he's paying for." Ava's breath caught. Her feet didn't move, but her shoulders tensed, her chin trembling. She looked past Sierra, searching the crowd. For Liam, for someone, for anything. "He's in the back," Sierra said, leaning in like she was offering a secret. "And guess what? He's with me. Not you." Ava pushed forward, brushing past Sierra, but the mistress grabbed her wrist sharply. "Don't!" Sierra hissed. "Don't embarrass yourself again." The pressure of Sierra's fingers dug into her skin. Ava pulled away, let go. "You're always so dramatic," Sierra said, pulling something from her clutch, a small silver perfume atomizer. Ava stepped back, her eyes narrowing. Sierra smiled wider. "Just a little something to remember me by." The crowd didn't move. No one understood what was happening until the liquid sprayed through the air. Ava turned instinctively, but not fast enough. The acid hit her left cheek and shoulder with a hiss, the scent sharp and wrong. In one motion, her body jerked backward as she screamed, the sound raw and animal. She crumpled to the floor, her hands clawing at her face. The boutique froze. Ava screamed again, rolling onto her side. Her coat slipped open, and the full curve of her pregnant belly became visible. Phones dropped. Gasps echoed. "Somebody do something!" a voice shouted. "Call 911!" Sierra stood still, the silver spray container still in her hand. Her confident smile had melted into confusion, then fear. I didn't mean—" "You threw acid!" someone screamed from the crowd. "She's pregnant!" Two staff members rushed to Ava's side with water bottles and napkins, useless in their panic. Ava sobbed, blood and skin bubbling beneath her hand. Her eye was already closing, and her voice cracked through the pain. A woman tried to pour water gently on the wound, but Ava screamed louder. "I need help!" the woman shouted. Then the boutique door slammed open. Liam stepped in, dressed in a fitted black suit, a phone still in his hand. He froze as he saw Ava curled on the floor. The screaming, the blood, the chaos. His eyes locked on Sierra. She dropped the silver bottle. I was defending myself," she said quickly. "She came at me." Liam walked forward, slowly at first, then faster. He didn't speak until he stood inches from her. "You did this?" His voice was low. Sierra looked around, trying to gauge the room. "She threatened me. I panicked. She shouldn't have—" His hand moved before anyone saw it coming. The slap cracked through the room. Sierra stumbled back, her heel catching on the edge of a display. She collapsed into a rack of gowns, clutching her cheek in disbelief. "You threw acid on my wife," Liam said, barely containing the rage. "She's not your wife anymore," Sierra cried out. "You told me you wanted her gone." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and crouched beside Ava, but she recoiled. "Don't," she whispered, barely conscious. "Don't touch me." Liam's face shifted, the fury drained, replaced by something like guilt. He reached again, slower this time. But Ava twisted away, curling into herself. "She said, 'You brought me here to trap me,'" Ava croaked. "You wanted me gone." He shook his head, but she wasn't listening. The medics had arrived, pushing through the cluster of silent guests. One of them knelt beside her, checking her pulse, issuing orders. "She's going into shock," one of them said. "We need to move now." Ava was lifted onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled her toward the door, Liam followed in silence. The crowd parted. Everyone watched. No one spoke. Sierra tried to stand, her voice breaking as she shouted after Liam. "I did this for us." He didn't turn around. The flashing lights outside bathed the boutique in red and blue, and as the doors shut behind the medics, Ava disappeared into the night, burned, betrayed, and barely breathing. The fluorescent lights above flickered softly as nurses wheeled Ava through the hallway, her face partially bandaged, her body weakened but clinging to life. The acid had spared her right eye, but the left side of her face was raw and blistered, the skin grafts still fresh. Her shoulder was wrapped tightly beneath layers of gauze. Each breath she took came shallow, and her lips barely moved when she spoke to the nurse who adjusted her IV. She hadn't said Liam's name once. Outside the hospital, camera flashes exploded behind the glass entrance. News vans lined the curb. The boutique incident had gone viral within hours. "Wife of real estate mogul attacked at fashion event," the headlines read, each one paired with shaky phone footage of Ava's collapse and Sierra's arrest. But none of it felt real to Ava. In her quiet hospital room, the world outside no longer belonged to her. She refused every visitor. Flowers were returned. Letters went unread. When Liam came, she told the nurses to keep the door locked. Liam paced in his car just beyond the emergency bay, hands clenched, phone vibrating every few minutes. His publicist had released a statement saying he was devastated by recent events and cooperating fully with authorities. But privately, in a leaked voice memo to one of his legal advisors, Liam's tone was colder. Emotions got out of hand. Sierra just lost it. Ava shouldn't have come there. She was told to stay away. Those words hit headlines 24 hours later. The clip was short but damning. It spread like wildfire across gossip sites and business forums alike. Commentators split in two, some blaming Sierra's temper, others questioning Liam's loyalty. And then Sierra herself stepped into the spotlight. Cameras rolled as she sat in a pale pink dress, hands resting neatly on her lap, looking every bit the composed woman. "I want to start by saying I never meant to hurt Ava," she said into the microphone, voice soft. "But I loved Liam. I still do. We were going to have a family." Gasps went up from the press line. Sierra paused for effect, then placed a hand over her stomach. "I'm pregnant with his child." The claim echoed across every outlet within minutes. Questions exploded. Reporters shoved mics forward, demanding timelines, proof, answers. But Sierra offered none, just a quiet smile and a line Liam hadn't authorized. "Liam and I were already planning a life together. Ava just couldn't let go." Back at the hospital, Ava sat propped in bed, silent as Rachel, the only person she still trusted, scrolled through the news coverage on her phone. She didn't flinch as Sierra's statement played aloud, but her fingers curled into the blanket. "She's lying," Rachel said. "And he's letting her." Ava didn't speak. "He could have shut this down," Rachel continued. "Instead, he let her make that claim on national television." "I want to leave," Ava said quietly. Within 48 hours, the hospital approved her discharge. No press were allowed near the rear exit, and Rachel had arranged a car through a private contact. Ava stepped into the back seat with sunglasses covering what remained of her left eye and the lower part of her cheek. Her coat was loose, draped over the arm that still ached to move. She gave no destination, only a word: home. But when they reached the gates of the estate, everything was different. Security didn't recognize the car. Rachel lowered the window. "It's Mrs. Whitmore." The guard checked his tablet, then looked back. "There's no entry for that name." Rachel blinked. "She lives here. Her husband owns this house." "Not anymore," the guard replied. "New resident directive. Only Mr. Whitmore and Miss Hale are cleared for access." Ava's stomach twisted. Rachel stepped out of the car, demanding to speak with management, but the gate remained shut. No one inside answered. Ava sat motionless until Rachel returned, her face flushed with disbelief. "They said your belongings were packed up, sent to storage." Ava turned her head slowly toward the house. Beyond the gates, she could see the edge of the garden she once designed, the marble driveway where she stood on her wedding day, the windows of the bedroom where she first saw her baby's heartbeat on a sonogram. None of it was hers anymore. They drove to the nearest storage facility, listed on a printed receipt the guard had begrudgingly handed over. Inside a cold unit, Ava's clothes were folded neatly in boxes. Her jewelry case was half empty. Her wedding dress had been tossed on top of a filing cabinet. When Rachel tried to unlock Ava's phone to call a lawyer, it displayed "no service." Ava reached for the front pocket of her bag where her backup phone usually sat. It wasn't there. Rachel tried to transfer funds for a hotel stay, but Ava's bank app denied access. Frozen due to account authorization conflict. Everything, her identity, her access, her history, had been wiped clean. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, Ava stood in a cheap motel room off Route 36, wrapped in the same coat she wore the night Sierra tried to destroy her. The scar beneath her bandages itched, and every muscle in her body ached from a pain that went deeper than skin. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed beside her, holding a folder with printed screenshots. Sierra's statements, Liam's leaked, audio, and the most chilling item of all, a newly filed public record showing Ava's legal status at the mansion marked as revoked due to dissolution of marital assets. "Liam signed a property revision form 2 days ago," Rachel said. "He's rewriting the narrative, and they're making it stick." Ava looked up, eyes hollow but clear. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stared at the ceiling, like she was calculating something, because something inside her had shifted. Whatever remained of the woman Sierra thought she broke had started to rise. The trees around the outer edge of the Whitmore estate swayed quietly as Ava and Rachel crept along the unpaved trail that curved behind the old stables. The main house loomed in the distance, its windows glowing with warmth Ava was no longer welcome in. But just beyond the forgotten hedges stood a smaller structure, weathered, boarded at the corners, and nearly swallowed by ivy. The old guest house. No one had used it in years, but Ava knew the key still hung behind the loose panel in the brick wall. Her fingers found it quickly, and she pushed the door open into darkness, the scent of dust and dried wood thick in the air. Inside, the house hadn't changed much. The furniture was draped in white sheets, cobwebs stretching from ceiling beams to floor lamps. The kitchen faucet still groaned when turned. Rachel helped her lower her bags onto the worn sofa, and together they lit 2 old lamps and pulled the drapes tight. No one knew they were here, and Ava planned to keep it that way. The next morning, the familiar knock of a cane against tile echoed through the house. Ava opened the door to find a frail woman standing with a cloth-wrapped bundle in her hands. Dolores, the retired housemaid who had served the Whitmore family for 3 decades, gave her a slow nod. "I figured you'd come here," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ava took the bundle and unwrapped it. Clean linens, dried food, a half-dozen candles, and an old phone charger. "I told them I quit when they brought her into the main bedroom," Dolores muttered. "Didn't say why, just left, but I kept the guest house key. I never trusted that woman." Ava's voice cracked as she whispered thank you. Dolores gave her a longer look, then pointed toward the back study. "If you're looking for what I think you're looking for, it's in the drawer under the floor vent." Ava didn't ask how she knew. She simply moved. The back study was musty, its wood-paneled walls still lined with forgotten books and brittle photo frames. She cleared away the dust, opened the cabinet beneath the vent, and found the drawer locked with a tarnished padlock. Rachel stood behind her, silent. Ava took a fireplace poker and slammed it once, then again. On the third hit, the lock snapped. Inside were 3 thick folders. Each was labeled only with a date and initials. Ava opened the first and found a familiar set of hospital forms, birth plan details, an ultrasound request, all in her name. But the doctor's signature was wrong. Her actual OB-GYN had retired the previous year. The listed name was from a private clinic downtown she'd never visited. Ava flipped to the last page and found a prescription written for a woman named S. Hale. The second folder contained what looked like paternity test documentation, but the date was weeks before Ava even announced her pregnancy publicly. The lab stamp had been whited out and replaced. A sticky note had been carelessly left on the inside flap. "Make sure this version is printed for court." Below it, Liam's signature. The third folder sent a chill through her bones. A blood panel with Sierra's name on it. Pregnancy indicators marked negative. Dated 3 days before the press conference. Rachel leaned over her shoulder. She lied. More than lied, Ava said, her voice sharp now. She built a case to replace me. Rachel took the folders and spread them on the floor, snapping pictures with her phone. "These alone won't be enough. We'll need the original lab reports, and witness statements, and proof this wasn't just Sierra." Ava stepped back and sat on the edge of the chair. "Liam knew," she said. "His signature's on this." Rachel looked up. "He's either complicit or careless enough to let her manipulate him. Either way, he'll burn with her." Over the next few days, the guest house became their war room. Dolores brought more supplies at dawn and dusk, never staying long. Ava used an old laptop Rachel brought to catalog the files and cross-check doctor names, legal case numbers, and news releases. Rachel contacted 2 quiet sources, a nurse from the private clinic and a technician from the paternity lab. Both agreed to meet if identities stayed protected. On the 3rd night, Rachel returned with a flash drive and a tight smile. "You're not going to believe this," she said, plugging it in. "The clinic Sierra used? It doesn't exist anymore. But the nurse I found used to work there. She gave me this." A grainy video loaded onto the screen. Sierra stood in a hallway, arguing, with a woman in scrubs. "You told me you could fake the results," Sierra snapped. "He's expecting confirmation," the nurse replied. "I said I could delay the real results. I never said I'd forge them." Sierra's voice dropped to a hiss. "You think he'll care about delays? I'm the future of this family." "She's done. She's already halfway gone." Ava stared at the screen, unmoving. Her fingers curled around the arm of the chair. The burn on her cheek ached in rhythm with her heartbeat. Everything she had suspected, every piece of the nightmare she'd lived, was being stitched back together with hard evidence. Not imagination, not paranoia. Truth. Rachel leaned forward. This is enough to launch a case. But if we go public now, they'll twist it. You've been painted as unstable. If we make a move too early, they'll bury this. Then we don't. Go public, Ava replied. We go deeper. We go smart. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like a warning. But inside the guest house, Ava's eyes held something steady now. Not fear, not grief. Focus. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't just surviving. She was preparing. The walls of the mansion had seen everything. Weddings, business, deals, betrayals. But tonight, they bore silent witness to something far more dangerous. Hidden behind the hedge line, Ava and Rachel made their way toward the side entrance used by caterers and staff. Dolores had left the security panel code behind an old flower pot just as she promised. With gloved hands, Rachel keyed it in, and the small green light blinked once before the door clicked open. They slipped inside, into the dark corridor that led to the servant wing, their steps muffled on the carpet runners. The mansion's study was exactly as Ava remembered. Her husband's mahogany desk sat untouched, the same stack of outdated financial journals and unread books beside the inkwell. But it wasn't the surface they were after. Rachel pulled up, the rug revealing a concealed panel in the floor beneath the desk. Ava knelt beside it, pulling it up with effort. Beneath the floorboards, a safe. Rachel slid a small USB device into the laptop she carried and connected it to the safe's electronic pad. A few clicks later, the lock disengaged. Inside were dozens of manila folders, contracts, USB drives, and handwritten letters bundled with twine. Ava began pulling them out one by one, laying them across the floor. Rachel opened a folder labeled Estate Holdings, Confidential, and scrolled through scanned copies of property deeds and internal memos. Here, she said, pointing to a document signed 2 years ago. This shows a transfer of one of the Arizona properties to an S. Hale. That's Sierra. Ava stared at it. Liam's father was the one who owned that lot. Rachel nodded slowly. And here's where it gets worse. This letter. She held up a faded envelope sealed with wax. It's from Edward Whitmore, dated before he passed. It's addressed to your husband, but never opened. Ava took the letter and broke the seal. Inside, Edward's handwriting was careful, almost delicate. Liam, I made a mistake, the letter read. Sierra. She was never meant to be more than a business favor. She had something on me. Records from the offshore accounts, things I did in the 90s to keep the company afloat. She threatened exposure. I gave her land, funds, silence. And then I slept with her. I didn't know she'd turn on the owl. Family. If you're reading this, she's already in deeper than she should be. Ava's hands trembled as she lowered the letter. She looked around the study, the portraits, the trophies, the shelves filled with staged achievements, and suddenly it all felt rotten. The woman who scarred her for life wasn't just Liam's mistress. She was a blackmailer who had been embedded in the family long before Ava ever stepped foot in it. Rachel opened another folder, one marked Personal Correspondence, JL. Inside were printed text transcripts and email chains between Sierra and someone listed as ER. Ava's eyes widened as she recognized her sister Emily's email address. She was feeding her information, Ava whispered. Rachel skimmed the files. Emails about your appointments, doctor visits, bank password changes. Your sister gave her all of it. Ava covered her mouth with one hand, her bandaged fingers brushing against the skin still healing. Her sister had been the one who helped. Her pick out the crib. The one who cried when she told her she was pregnant. She had said, I'd die before I let anything happen to you. And yet, here it was, betrayal documented, signed, and paid for. One of the emails had a payment receipt attached, a down payment on a high-rise apartment in Sierra's name with Emily as the tenant. The tears came slowly, then all at once. Ava collapsed into the armchair beside the desk, her body curling into itself as sobs shook through her. Rachel didn't speak. She crouched nearby and waited, the kind of silence that settles only when someone has lost more than they can explain. When Ava's breathing finally slowed, her voice was hoarse. "I thought losing Liam was the worst thing. But this, my own blood. They gutted your life piece by piece," Rachel said. "But they left the evidence." Ava sat up, wiping her face with her sleeve. The burn stung from the moisture, but she didn't care. Her eyes had cleared, and something inside her had hardened. "Then I'll take everything back piece by piece," she said. "Not for forgiveness, not to be seen, but to make sure they don't do this to anyone else." Rachel leaned in. "That means no more hiding." Ava nodded. "No more begging, no more fear." They packed everything quickly. Files, drives, the letter, the property records. Before they left, Ava turned to the painting above the fireplace, the one of Edward Whitmore standing next to Liam as a teenager. She stepped forward and tore it from the wall, watching as it crashed to the floor. The noise rang out through the empty study like a warning bell. She didn't flinch. They slipped out the same way they came in, disappearing into the night with every piece of proof they needed to destroy the web Sierra and the Whitmores had built. Ava didn't look back at the house. She had already buried what it once meant. The Gala hall shimmered with gold and white, chandeliers hanging like frozen stars above the crowd. Laughter echoed between marble columns as champagne flutes clinked and heels clicked across the polished floors. Sierra stood, at the center of it all, her fitted emerald gown clinging to every curve, a small bump beneath the fabric barely visible but enough to stir whispers. She played it perfectly, one hand resting on her belly, the other waving gently at reporters. The Whitmore Legacy Gala banners hung behind her as cameras snapped photos of the woman who had seemingly taken Ava's place without contest. What Sierra didn't know was that the new donor who had bought a premium table near the front of the ballroom wasn't a distant European heiress named Elise Marlowe, but the very woman she'd tried to erase. Ava's hair was darker now, cut at the shoulders. The burn on her cheek had faded to a smooth scar partially hidden by foundation and a delicate lace veil that matched her evening dress. Rachel sat beside her, nodding as investors and socialites passed by, unaware they were shaking hands with the ghost of a scandal they thought had died weeks ago. It had taken months of work. Rachel had helped her set up an alias with deep-pocketed anonymity. Elise Marlowe, a Monaco-based investor with shell holdings that quietly purchased 4% of Whitmore Global's equity. Not enough to make noise, but enough to sit in the same rooms where power whispered. Anonymous packages had started appearing on the desks of the company's board members 2 weeks earlier. Documents detailing unauthorized asset transfers, false pregnancy medical claims filed under corporate insurance, offshore expense write-offs linked to Sierra's personal travel, and video evidence that the company's founder, Edward Whitmore, had been blackmailed into rewriting property rights. Each envelope had no return address, just a red wax seal and a card that read, "Check what's beneath the floor." 2 board members resigned quietly. One lawyer stopped returning Sierra's calls, but no one had gone public yet. Everyone was waiting, watching. Ava sipped from her glass and kept her eyes on the stage as Sierra took the mic. Her voice was smooth at first, thanking guests, praising the Whitmore Foundation, throwing a charming glance toward Liam, who stood off to the side in a tailored navy suit, his smile tight and mechanical. Then the murmurs started. A table near. The right entrance shifted. One woman leaned over to whisper into her husband's ear, holding a phone beneath the tablecloth. Another guest raised a brow as he skimmed a paper that had mysteriously been slipped into his jacket pocket at the coat check. Sierra's voice hesitated, just briefly, but the crack was there. As many of you know," she continued, "we've recently expanded our humanitarian outreach, particularly focusing on family health and..." Another whisper cut her off. Ava didn't move. She watched Sierra's eyes scan the room, nervous, flickering, trying to locate the source of the shift. Her fingers gripped the edge of the podium harder. Sweat beaded just beneath her flawless makeup. A faint tremble passed through her arm as she lifted her glass of water. Rachel leaned closer to Ava. 3 more board members just opened the package, she murmured. They know about the forged sonograms. Ava nodded once. She stood quietly, excusing herself from the table. No one stopped her. They wouldn't have recognized her if they tried. She moved through the hallway lined with gold trim and velvet curtains until she reached the back corridor where staff passed with trays of desserts. Sierra had just stepped off stage. Liam followed her, his expression cold, but she kept her back to him, pushing past the ballroom door toward the dressing area. Ava waited. As Sierra passed by the mirrored corner, she paused to adjust her hair. That's when she saw her. For a moment, neither spoke. Sierra's eyes locked on the scar just visible beneath Ava's veil. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her fingers twitched at her side, a tremble she couldn't control. Ava didn't speak either. She simply stepped forward, placed a small sealed envelope into Sierra's designer clutch, and walked past her without making eye contact. Sierra's hand darted toward the envelope, opening it with jerky fingers. Inside was a sonogram printout, the one Sierra had faked. Except this version had a red stamp across it that read, "Void, lab forgery confirmed." There was no message, no threat, just the proof. Sierra looked up, but Ava was already gone, lost in the folds of the crowd. Back in the ballroom, the music played louder now, but attention had settled in the air. Liam was no longer by Sierra's side. The board members had quietly formed a cluster near the far table, their eyes turning not toward the stage, but toward each other. And from her seat at the far end, Ava watched it all. The cracks forming, the balance shifting, with the calm silence of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. The room buzzed with low murmurs as the board assembled in the glass-walled conference hall of Whitmore Global's downtown tower. Executives took their seats around the long, polished table, the skyline behind them bathed in a golden evening hue. Liam stood near the head of the table, speaking softly to one of the shareholders, adjusting his cufflink with forced calm. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The whispers hadn't stopped since the gala, and today, something felt off. 2 security men stood by the door, unusual for a routine quarterly meeting. A few members exchanged looks. The chairman tapped his pen twice, and just as Liam began his opening remarks, the doors opened. Ava stepped in without hesitation. No disguise. No veil. Her face bore the scar that had been hidden for weeks, the burn running from her temple to her jawline, faded now, but permanent. Her suit was sleek, dark, and understated. Her posture, unshaken. The murmurs died. Chairs creaked. Liam froze mid-sentence. She said nothing at first. She simply walked to the table and placed a leather case in front of the chairman, unzipping it slowly. Rachel appeared behind her, setting a laptop beside the case and plugging it into the room's central display screen. No one moved. Liam took one step forward, but the security detail shifted subtly in front of him. Ava finally spoke. "I was asked to leave quietly," she said, "so they could build a lie without interruption. What they didn't expect was that I'd come, back with proof." The screen behind her lit up with a video, grainy footage of Sierra at the private clinic, demanding altered lab results, her voice unmistakable. One board member leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Another looked away, jaw tight. Rachel tapped again, loading the next file. A scanned copy of forged paternity documents, with a highlighted signature reading L. Whitmore. Beside it, a real notarized test dated months earlier showing Ava's unborn child as Liam's biological heir. A time-stamped audio clip followed, Sierra's voice boasting to someone over the phone. "Once they believe I'm pregnant, Ava's nothing but a memory." Gasps erupted. The chairman raised a hand to silence the room, but Ava wasn't finished. She slid forward printed testimony from a nurse at the clinic, signed and notarized. Bank records showed transfers from company accounts to Sierra's offshore holdings. Property deeds revealed Sierra's name tied to 3 assets once under the Whitmore Trust, assets Edward had tried to hide, but which Ava had tracked down. Liam stepped forward, trying to maintain composure. "This is a personal attack," he said, his voice strained. "It has nothing to do with company business." Ava turned to face him directly. "You forged signatures on official filings. You allowed medical fraud to be processed through company. Insurance. You funneled money out of the estate to a woman who lied about carrying your child." He didn't answer. His mouth opened, then closed. The board sat in silence. The chairman cleared his throat, lifting a folder Ava had handed him. "The evidence is clear, and it's been verified by independent counsel." He looked toward Liam, then down the table. "Effective immediately, I move to remove Liam Whitmore from all executive duties and freeze his access to corporate accounts pending legal review." Hands raised without hesitation. One by one. The final tally. Unanimous. Liam stood alone, eyes darting from face to face. "You can't be serious," he muttered. "You don't understand." But before he could finish, the side doors to the conference room opened again, and 2 police officers stepped in. Behind them, Sierra appeared. In the doorway, wrapped in a beige coat, her makeup flawless, until she saw Ava. She stopped. Her mouth fell open. "She's not supposed to be here." The officers stepped forward. "Sierra Hale?" Her eyes widened. "You're making a mistake. I'm pregnant. You can't—" "We have medical confirmation that no such pregnancy exists," one officer said, placing a hand on her arm. "You're being arrested for fraud, falsification of medical records, and obstruction of corporate investigation." "No, no, Liam, say something!" she screamed, turning to him as the cuffs clicked behind her. "You said we'd handle this. You said—" But Liam didn't move. As they dragged her from the room, her sobs echoed down the hallway. The doors closed again, sealing in the silence. Ava stood at the end of the table, facing the board members and remaining executives. She wasn't smiling. Her scar made her face look harder, more angular under the conference lighting. But no one looked. "Away, not anymore," the chairman stood. "Mrs. Whitmore, I believe the floor is yours." She shook her head slowly. "I didn't come here to reclaim titles. I came to clean up the mess your leaders made in the dark." And with that, she gathered the remaining folders, turned, and walked out of the room. No applause, no fanfare. Just quiet stares that followed her all the way to the elevator. As the doors slid shut behind her, Liam remained standing near the window, silent, watching the press vans swarm the street below. He had built an empire on silence and shadows. Now it stood wide open for the world to see, and the one woman he thought he'd buried had just turned it upside down. The courtroom was quiet, except for the steady rustle of documents and the occasional creak of leather chairs. Ava sat on the left side, dressed simply in black. Her posture was still, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Across the room, Liam sat flanked by attorneys, looking thinner, older. His tie was perfect, but his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. The judge, a woman with a calm but firm demeanor, flipped through the final case file and nodded once before speaking. After review of the submitted evidence, signed affidavits, corporate documentation, and confirmed fraud findings, the court hereby restores all revoked estate entitlements to Mrs. Ava Whitmore. All associated assets, including the North Harbor property, family shares in Whitmore Global, and the disputed inheritance portfolio, are to be transferred back under her legal control effective immediately. A murmur rose from the observers' benches. Liam didn't lift his head. The judge continued. However, Mrs. Whitmore has submitted a personal request regarding financial disbursement. This court acknowledges her legal right to decline personal payouts connected to fraudulent activities within the estate and will honor her motion to redirect the funds. Ava stood. I've arranged to donate 70% of the returned wealth to the National Burn Recovery Foundation, she said, her voice clear. The rest will be used to establish a shelter for women facing violence and displacement. Under no family name, no legacy stamp. The judge nodded. So ordered. Liam looked up for the first time, but Ava didn't glance in his direction. She gathered her papers, thanked the judge, and walked out of the courtroom without hesitation. Outside, the air was cool, the sky gray, but Ava felt no chill. Rachel waited beside the car, holding a folder and a warm drink. She smiled softly as Ava approached. It's done, Rachel said. It was done the moment they didn't finish me, Ava replied. They got in and drove, passing by familiar streets Ava hadn't seen since the day she arrived at the boutique in hopes of a conversation. The city had kept moving, so had she. Later that week, the boutique reopened its doors, but not for fashion. The marble counters were replaced with resource tables. The mirrors had been removed. The front windows displayed posters for trauma counseling and healing workshops. Ava walked through the space slowly, her heels clicking gently on the newly polished floors. Where once mannequins stood draped in couture, now sat small benches, soft chairs, and bookshelves stocked with information on recovery, legal aid, and empowerment programs. A woman at the desk smiled as Ava passed. The first group arrives tomorrow. Ava nodded. Make sure no one ever has to knock twice. She moved toward the back, the very spot where her world had shattered. A faint scar in the floor still marked where she had fallen. It hadn't been removed, only polished, left visible beneath the clear varnish. A quiet reminder of what the space used to be and what it had become. Through the large front window, across the street, Liam stood behind the wheel of a black car, engine idling. He hadn't sent flowers, hadn't asked for forgiveness, but he came anyway, as if just being nearby might bring something back. Ava saw him but didn't stop. She walked right past the glass, never breaking stride. Her reflection flickered over his silhouette, and then she was gone, moving forward. That night, in her new home, smaller, brighter, her name on every document, Ava stood by the open window, watching a young mother walk her daughter down the sidewalk. A gentle breeze shifted the curtain beside her. The burn scar caught the golden light from the lamp beside the couch, and for once, she didn't flinch from her own reflection in the window pane. They tried to erase her face, her name, and her place, but she returned with the truth no one could bury. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and stay with us for more.